Hello, my name is Keith Robinson. I teach 8th grade U.S. history at Liberty Union Middle School in Baltimore, Ohio. And today I'm going to be taking you through my website, which shows my slavery at Mount Vernon, the forgotten people who made George Washington's world revolve lesson for EDCI 522. The first page is a lesson introduction, which has a fairly familiar painting of George Washington. And normally, when you first look at it, your eyes go to him. But then, upon second glance, you realize that there is someone in the background. That person in the background, they believe, is William Lee. Now, I don't know that there's anyone in this country who doesn't know who George Washington is, but the majority of people don't know who William Lee was. William Lee was one of 317 enslaved people who lived at Mount Vernon, who made George Washington's world revolve. So what we'll be addressing in this lesson is three things. Number one, students are going to virtually explore the Mount Vernon estate and uncover how slavery was essential to its design. Number two, I want students to be able to discern Washington's evolving view of the institution of slavery over time by reading primary source documents. And then number three, students are going to examine the Lives Bound Together exhibit, which is at Mount Vernon right now. And they're going to uncover some of the stories of the enslaved people that made Mount Vernon work. Once students have completed these tasks, they will create a virtual museum which will tell the story of the role that slavery played in the life of George Washington. On this intro page, I've also included a Google map, which, if you would like to check out the grounds, that's one way to see it. The next page is my Meet the Teacher page, where I am wearing my coveted forefather shirt. Last time I wore this to Mount Vernon, the people that work there got a pretty good kick out of it. The inspiration for this lesson actually came this past June. I was fortunate enough to be chosen of one of 16 teachers to spend 5 days living on the grounds of Mount Vernon, where we tore apart the issue of slavery in George Washington's world. We did that by touring the grounds. We had access to the grounds 24/7. There's nothing like sitting on the back piazza of Mount Vernon Estate at 5 o'clock in the morning, drinking a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise over the Potomac River, realizing George Washington used to do the exact same thing. But we looked at how George Washington viewed slavery, how the enslaved people that lived there and on one of George Washington's 5 farms, how they made his world work. And if it weren't for them, Mount Vernon would not have been the place that it was. In this lesson, I address a number of 8th grade Ohio Social Studies content standards, as well as these P21 framework and NETS standards for both students and for teachers. Now let's get into the lessons themselves. Lesson 1, I entitled Slavery at Mount Vernon's Mansion Farm. Like I mentioned earlier, Washington actually owned 5 farms. And you can see from this map, which is a primary source document, that the Mansion Farm, which is, if you go to Mount Vernon today, that's right here is where you visit. But there were a number of farms that George Washington owned. And students are going to first take a look at that map. And we're going to talk about how those 5 farms wouldn't have worked if it weren't for Mount Vernon. Then students, after they get on Google Classroom, they'll find a link to the Mount Vernon site. And on the Mount Vernon site, students can take a virtual tour of the grounds. Now, for this lesson, what I'll be doing is I'll be putting students in groups of 3 to 4. This will be, mixed ability groups. And what students are going to do is each group is going to get a very large sheet of chart paper. And students are going to tour virtually the grounds of Mount Vernon. And what they're going to do is map out which parts of Mount Vernon slaves had a hand in. Now, there's a number of ways to navigate this site. This site has lots of embedded videos, exploded views. Say you want to go inside the mansion. It's very interactive and it takes you through the entire grounds. And what students will discover is there was not a single portion of Mount Vernon that enslaved people didn't have access to or didn't work on. They were everywhere. And if it weren't for those 317 enslaved people, Mount Vernon would not have worked. Now, once students are done, I've got an individual quick assessment for them. Students are going to have to answer the following question. Based on what you've learned about the layout of Mansion Farm, do you think Washington was a good slave owner? Use specific examples from the assignment to answer the question. Now, a lot of kids in this age don't really understand slavery. So a lot of them are going to say, yeah, he was a good slave owner. You know, he had cabins for them to live on. He gave them a ration of beans and a fish every day. He was a good slave owner. He let them visit their other family members that worked on other farms on Saturdays and Sundays part of the day. He was a good slave owner. But what I hope kids through this unit find out is there really was no such thing as a good slave owner. It's really hard to say anyone who owned another person was a good slave owner. Now, we will address that question, a good slave owner, throughout the rest of this unit. In lesson 2, we're going to be analyzing primary source documents. And the way we're going to do that is by beginning with the Declaration of Independence. Students, which they will have already talked about this in my class, we're going to just very quickly take a look at the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, specifically that portion that says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Through the with this text and through the I'm going to have students kind of talk in groups and talk with the people that are around them. What did those guys back then mean by all men are created equal? What did they mean by life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And then after that hook, to get their minds activated, we're going to, once again in groups, we're going to be looking at some primary source documents. Now, these will be available to students on Google Classroom. And what students are going to be doing is they're going to divide these up in their groups. They're going to have to write one-sentence summaries of each one of these documents. And what I hope that they see is, and they're going to have to put them in chronological order, which they are not in chronological order. What I hope that they see and that they uncover is that early in Washington's life, when he first inherits Mount Vernon and he has slaves working there at Mount Vernon, he is pretty strict and pretty harsh slave owner. But over time, his attitude starts to change. And if we look at the dates, we find his attitudes change towards slavery as the revolution goes on. Now, we know that one of the key principles to the revolution is, once again, going back to the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those ideas are going to change George Washington. George Washington's also going to see the slaves differently, because many enslaved people are going to take up arms in cause of the revolution against the British. And he's going to see that. And so his attitudes towards slavery are going to change. Now, once we get done analyzing those and we talk about all of that and students make that connection, something that's called contextualization, what was going on at the time when this primary source was written, I'm going to hand that assessment from the previous lesson back out. Was George Washington a good slave owner? And then, as you can see here, I'm going to ask him the question, do you still agree with your original statement about Washington? Based on what you learned today, has your opinion of Washington changed? Be specific in your answer, using text evidence to back up your claim. Now, there will be all kinds of answers here. Some of the kids are going to say, yeah, he was a good slave owner. I still agree with that because when he died, he emancipated his slaves. Well, at least some of them, well, a few of them anyways. Other students are going to have differing opinions on that. Well, in his will, he really says once Martha dies, the slaves are going to be freed. And as they start to really dig into this, their attitudes about Washington and how he viewed slavery are going to change as well. Now, lesson 3 is where we get into the Lives Bound Together portion of Mount Vernon and the mountvernon.org website. Once again, we have a hook. This time, students are going to watch this quick video, which is produced by the Mount Vernon Foundation. And it kind of lays the groundwork for the fact that while there were 317 enslaved people,
George Washington was born into a world where slavery was common. Washington's views on slavery evolved over the course of his life. This is the story of his evolution and of the enslaved people whose fates were intertwined with his own.
Now, what students are gonna see is that, like it said there in the introduction, that Washington's views towards slavery changed, but we're also going to see that there were a lot of people that lived there who their stories were never told. Those were the ones that made Washington's world work, but yet their stories were never told. And one observation that students will make as they watch this video is the fact that whenever a slave is shown, they never show the slave's face.
The judge ran away from the president's house in Philadelphia, and Hercules from Mount Vernon.
They show Washington's face quite often, but they never show any of the faces of these enslaved people. And so I asked that question to the students. Why do you think the producer of this video did it that way? And what I want them to see is these were people who were robbed of those Declaration of Independence ideas, that all men are created equal and that they're endowed with their Creator with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what students will be doing in this portion of the lesson, after they are randomly assigned an enslaved person using this random choice wheel, I try to lighten the mood a little bit. It's kind of a heavy subject. So students will be assigned a specific enslaved person using this wheel. Then what they will do is they will go to the Lives Bound Together portion of the Mount Vernon website. They will find their person. And then what they're going to be doing is they're going to be collaboratively building a Google slide presentation. All kids are going to have access to the same one. And they are going to find their portion. And then they're going to make an obituary for whoever they were assigned. We're going to try to honor these people as much as we can and try to tell their story. Now, once again, we will go back to that idea of, do you think Washington was a good slave owner? And at this point, we're going to really hone in on the fact that, is it really possible to have been a good slave owner? All of this is going to lead us to our final project, where students are going to create a virtual museum about slavery in George Washington's world. Now, I have included on this website a tutorial for how this virtual museum works, but it's very simple. Students will complete this individually. This is what the museum lobby looks like. They're going to rename all of these, and these are all hyperlinked. So once I go here, there's going to be artifacts that they're going to have to put. Once you click on these artifacts, it goes to where you can expand on each one of these. And what students are going to have to do is they're going to have to tell the story of slavery at Mount Vernon. They also have to create a curator's page, tell me a little bit about them, and a reference sheet. Now, I have included a link to the grading rubric for this summative assessment, which can be found here. Students will get a copy of this through Google Classroom. the end of the website, I have included a survey that I would appreciate if you take. It's very brief, but it will give me some feedback about this lesson and about the materials that I have included. And last but not least, I have included some additional resources if this is a subject that has got your interest. There are some middle school appropriate resources that I've listed. Taking Liberty, which tells the story of Oni Judge, very interesting. Chains, which is historical fiction, but it does a great job of showing what the life of an enslaved person was like during the American Revolution. Kenneth Davis's Shadow of Liberty, The Hidden History of Slavery, 4 Presidents and 5 Black Lives, and last but not least, the Lives Bound Together book, which tells the story of those enslaved people at Mount Vernon. And there are some essays by historians on the issue. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I appreciate your feedback.